Hey, it's week 4, everyone. Week 4 of college football, 2 days away from a Thursday night game, and then some really good games on Friday and big matchups on a Saturday. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. You can do it every day. Make it a stop each and every day. 10 a.m. Eastern time for 60 to 90, depending on your decision. If you would like us to continue, then we will stay on past 11 o'clock. But we promise you, we declare 1 hour with you here at the Voice of College Football every day. And again, depending on whether you want us to stay on past that, hey, I'll talk college football all day, as I have many times. Week 3 in the books. Check out the video I posted on Monday, which was a conference rankings comparison. I ranked the conferences. I gave you all the metrics in regards to record outside the conference against the group of 5, the FCS, and of course, most importantly, against the other power conferences. Put it all into context. Looked ahead to the week 4 matchups. We've got 5 games between the Power 4 conferences. We might as well get used to saying Power 5 again, because I never transitioned from Power 5 to Power 4 anyway. The Power 5 is alive and well, apparently, because we've got 4 additions coming to the Pac-12 to make it a conference again, which it technically is still a conference anyway. And those 2 teams doing quite well. Maybe that sounds like a good subject matter in the next few weeks. If Washington State can continue to win, could Washington State make an at-large playoff bid? Look at their schedule, 12-0. Does it get it done with some decent wins? Interesting. Week 3 was not good on paper. Not good on paper. The matchups were not big. No big matchups in week 3. But week 3 was fun. It delivered some really good games. Week 4, we got some big matchups, and we will break them down right here at the Voice of College Football. We got Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered coming on in 1 hour, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll take some calls here and remind all of you that you can support the show a number of ways. Of course, just hit the like button. Please do that. It is something that YouTube is asking. Basically, hey, if 1,000 people watch this show, which hopefully we can do much better than that, but if 1,000 people watch this show and 3 people like it, you know what that tells YouTube? People don't like your show. We're not going to put it out there in traffic. And that's when a show or a video becomes popular, is when YouTube decides, hey, we're going to show this to other people. But I've seen it work both ways. YouTube sometimes suppresses content. Doesn't matter how good the content is, really. It has more to do with a lot of other logistics, but we want to drive the YouTube algorithm, so please hit the like button. Doesn't stroke my ego. I don't know how many likes there are on these videos, but we need to get the percentage up on the likes. Also, subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. We want to get to 100,000. You're not going to hear me mention any other subscriber landmarks until we hit 100,000. I do appreciate all of you pointing those things out when we hit different landmarks, but I myself will not utter a word until it's 100,000. Hopefully that comes in the next few weeks. All right, appreciate you being here. Let's take some calls. Dominic's on the line. Dominic, what's going on today?
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. What's going on with you?
Man, like you said, we got some big matchups for week number 4 on the college football schedule. Got some big ones. One of them being Southern Cal and Michigan. That'll be on 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. That one is one you're going to want to keep an eye on because, woo, those teams are very good right now. USC number 11, Michigan number 18.
Michigan's very good right now.
Yes.
Playing their best ball that they have in years.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at here.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm sure the chat would agree that Michigan is playing great football, the best football it's played probably since 2020.
Yeah. And looking at it right now,
Yeah.
USC's favored to win by 5.5. The last time I checked.
Well, they're crazy. Vegas must be crazy because Michigan's playing its best ball since 2020.
Yeah, they're probably crazy thinking that Southern Cal is going to win.
Yeah.
They are crazy. Also, another big game, Arkansas and Auburn. Another big game on the list. Auburn's favored to win by only 3.
Okay.
Like if you're thinking Auburn's favored to win by a field goal, like I could see that, but honestly, I've got Arkansas getting this win on the road. I mean,
Why? What's your
oh,
rationale?
oh, um, well, we know what happened last week.
What happened
And
last week?
sorry, I'm still trying to wake up. I'm sorry, Mark. Still trying to wake up a bit here, so I
All right,
apologize for
Dominic.
that.
Why don't you go take a nap? We appreciate you calling, and we'll talk to you soon. One small, tiny criteria that we ask when you call in the show. If you are a new college football fan, we welcome you. Sometimes I've got a few people in my life that say, you know what, it's a few people in the network, and otherwise that say, Mark, your standards are pretty high. We got to let these dumb college football fans in. When I say dumb, I don't mean you're dumb. Ignorant. That's a better term because I'm ignorant about all sorts of things. But let's say new college football fans, let them in, let them talk. Of course, not going to demean anyone, but don't pretend to be a fan. Don't pretend. Okay. Let me know. Hey, I just started watching college football 2 weeks ago. I have no idea what's going on. What's going on? I watched it last weekend. It was fun. Hey, I'm just getting into this. I found the voice of college football. There we go. Our guy Dominic's been calling for like 5 or 6 years. And Michigan is playing its best ball since 2020. Confirmed that over and over. So don't expect you to know everything or even 10% or okay. Let's go to our next call. All right, what's going on here today? We got our guy Dan on the line. What's going on?
I appreciate the last rant, and I think that's why a lot of us old heads have problems with Colorado.
And just to be clear, everyone, I ended the first call because that was a disservice to all of you. I could sit there and talk to him for 5 or 10 minutes and make any difference to me, but for you guys to be completely blown away with that kind of analysis, it's just dead air and it's just a waste of time. And, you know, driving away people by the droves, by the second. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
I like Dion, but it's that one type of thing that people think that like history starts today and nothing that has ever happened before matters at all going forward. Look at Florida has talent, OU has talent, right? But look at the overall administration above even like the head coach level. Who feels better on even a subpar season? From the expectations, from the president, the athletic director, etc. Is people get so focused in week to week, I don't think people see the bigger picture. They get like tunnel vision. Like, I'm not worried about Georgia struggling with Kentucky. That's been their MO the last, decade that they've gone to Kroger Field. I don't know. I can't explain it.
Well, this is what I can explain is that the last national champion that we have had that did not have any struggles the entire year. And I'm talking about struggles. I'm not talking about just playing a fairly competitive game. I'm talking about on the verge of losing, looking awful against pretty marginal teams. The last one that went a complete season and just trucked everyone was 1995 Nebraska. Every national champion since has either lost games or, even if they were undefeated, played extremely close games against marginal teams.
What about the last LSU national one? What was that struggle game that year?
Well, Auburn, 23-20.
Okay. I forgot about that
Texas, they had to score in the final couple minutes at Texas against an 8-5 Texas team. Those would be the two that come to mind.
No. You have a better memory than me.
It's been served me pretty well through the years.
Well, I know they dominated Texas, but I thought when I watched that game that LSU was never really like in doubt that they would win.
Okay.
But we're talking years ago.
Yep.
But games this week. OU Tennessee, with OU getting some like players back and actually opening up the playbook because they got nothing to lose. I mean, a couple wide receivers back, a couple offensive linemen back. What do they have to lose? Everyone's writing them off.
Well, considering the losses that you just mentioned, which I believe had lost 4 of their top 5 wide receivers and then 2 key offensive linemen, they were the most beat up football team that I know of in terms of key players on the 2 deep, starters, especially on one side of the ball, of anybody in the country. And they played pretty well against Tulane. They got challenged in the second half and they rebounded, and Tulane's a good team. Tulane is not going to be competing for a national championship or anything, but Tulane's a good team. Just played a Kansas State team that I would roughly put in the same category as Oklahoma, and had a 10-point lead on them and took them down to the wire. So I thought that was a good win for Oklahoma. They actually broadened that gap in terms of expanding that lead late. I thought it was a possible upset, not a probable. I picked Oklahoma to win, but so I was fairly impressed with how they played against Tulane. I watched most of that game.
But like even like this week, Arkansas and Auburn. How do you make a read on either team?
Well,
With
I believe
Auburn,
Arkansas played better than Auburn.
And Arkansas just wants to lose games by muffing punts and turning the ball over, etc. like, how do you bet that?
Well, they're playing at Auburn, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big deal to me, even though they lost to Cal a couple weeks ago. So there's always exceptions, of course. But I'm not a big home away guy. I think that's overblown, but I do think that that's one of the more difficult places to play. Is that a day game or a night game?
I'm pretty sure it's like an afternoon game. I don't remember.
3:30 kind of game. Yeah, I think that's pretty much of a toss-up. I do think Arkansas has played better. They should have beat Oklahoma State. They racked up 650 yards in that game, and Auburn's played pretty bad football. Well, they only played one decent team, and they looked horrible.
Well, I wouldn't even say Cal is a decent team.
Well,
I mean, I don't think they're like horrible.
Decent. Cal's 3-0, and
horrible, but
I'd say they're a decent team.
But I am not for sure what to make of like Michigan either with their quarterback. I thought Michigan would at least keep it competitive when they played Texas, with Texas losing their interior defensive lineman. Well, we'll just run it up the middle and milk the clock. I had Texas to win, but not cover. Right. But I thought Michigan would like make it a game.
I did too.
I think, but like after watching the Texas game, I don't know if USC's defense will make it through an entire year because they don't have the depth, because Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch never really recruited for it. And injuries pile up through the year. But I'm not aware of like any injuries, so I think USC is going to roll Michigan this week.
That's what it looks like right now. The way the two teams are playing, that's what it looks like. But sometimes teams show up differently. If Michigan won that game, it would not surprise me in any such way. But I think there's a good reason why USC is a substantial favorite in the game, which would have been completely flip-flopped 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Vegas would have had Michigan as a 7 or 8 point favorite. But
that also
teams are playing completely different football right now.
That also shows like how much it changes week to week and how like perception becomes reality for a lot of people. And so you got to keep taking a step back. And I think you do a very good job of it. Pump the brakes. Missouri did not look good against Boston College, stopping the run. Now, is that a 1 week thing? Who knows? But they did lose their defensive coordinator last year. We need more.
And a lot of players to the NFL draft on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and we need more data points like to be for sure. Luckily for them, they have a good SEC schedule, but I always try to like step back and look at the big picture. And I think you do a wonderful job of that.
Well, I appreciate that. None of us are right all the time, so I just take my best stab at it. And I rely on history a lot of times because I tend to, when there's a situation, say, okay, if we've seen this similar situation throughout college football history, especially recently, and how many times has it broken one way or the other? Yeah, when I pump the brakes, I'll say that because most fans are reactional, and if something bad happens, especially bad, they overreact to one end of the spectrum. Now, that overreaction may turn out to be true. That one game that was horrific for whoever, Florida State, might turn out to be actually what is going to happen. I tend to pump the brakes and say, okay, I got to see it again. It didn't look good. I got to see it again because a lot of things course correct themselves, but other things, yeah. They looked off the rails in week one. They were off the rails. That happens a lot. Yeah.
Well, I have a minor in history and I read dusty old history books for fun for more than 30 years. But it's kind of like you, like just pump the brakes. Let's see it again and see a pattern. But I have no idea what's going on in the state of Florida between Florida and Florida State. I can't figure that out. I mean, it's like Coach Prime, but without the charisma and the fun. Like trying to build a team, and then like an awesome person by like every account, cleaning up the Florida program after, like Urban Meyer. How many of them are in prison now? You know what I mean? But just hasn't got the results like on the field. But both of them should be talented enough. They should not be in the situation that they're in.
Well, Dan, right off at the beginning of the conversation, you brought up OU and Florida and put them in the same sentence. And I don't think that these programs all time are really that comparable. Basically, Oklahoma is one of the true blue bloods in the history of the sport. Winning percentage, conference championships, national championships, on down the road, the whole deal. Okay. And when I go through the history of a program, some of it's relevant to what's going on today and some of it's not. What Army did in the 1940s has nothing to do with what's going on today. There's no connection, no attachment. It's not been continued. It's just history. But the history at places like Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State, have proven through the years, they just carry it through and they're committed to it and they bring it through. Florida, I put them on a different level, different category because, yeah, this has been a great football program at times. And historically, actually, they've got two coaches. They've had two coaches that have maximized Florida talent, Florida resources, and been elite. They were elite for the most part when Steve Spurrier was there for almost his entire tenure. Pretty much his entire tenure. They were elite. Urban Meyer, elite. Other than that, it's
Could the same be said for
they're Missouri.
Could the same be said for Florida State of Bobby Bowden, Jimbo Fisher? And then
I wouldn't take it to that extent because of this. Bobby Bowden showed up in 1976. It took him about 3 years to turn around the program, and boom, within 3 years, they're going to Orange Bowls from being just in the abyss. So Florida State really didn't have much of a football program until the late 70s. And then they were nothing but Bobby Bowden for 30 plus years. For 33 years, they only had one guy and then went right into Jimbo Fisher. And of course, he won a national championship and won some other big bowl games. And so it's pretty much they hired one coach in between Jimbo Fisher and now Mike Norvell. I wouldn't necessarily give up on the guy. He just went 13-1 last year, and he inherited a pretty bad situation. So,
well, I shouldn't have maybe said program. I should have maybe said current administration.
And that's what I wonder about Florida too, because since Urban Meyer left campus, they've hired 4 coaches, and you could argue that Dan Mullen was decent, but really all 4 have fallen short of expectations. And so I'm starting to think, okay, are the head coaches themselves the issue, or great programs hire excellent coaches and they know the athletic director? Scott Strickland's been there since 2012, 2016. So I don't know that he hired Will Muschamp. So he's hired these other 3 coaches. I start to look at the AD to say, athletic director, you've got a ton of responsibility, but you've got 2 main roles. Number 1, hire great coaches. If you hire great coaches in all these sports and give them the resources required, then you've done your job, and then you got to raise a lot of money. Those are your 2 jobs as athletic director, and he's working on 4 consecutive coaches that have failed. Although, again, Dan Mullen didn't necessarily fail. Dan Mullen had one bad year, and then he did just every conceivable stupid thing you could imagine off the field.
On a PR perspective.
Yes. If Dan Mullen would have been going through another 11-2, 10-3 season and done all those stupid things, they would have just kind of slapped him on the wrist and said, pipe down a little bit and everything's fine. But when you go 6-7 and do all those stupid things, then you get fired.
Well, I think and programs can go through the abyss for years too. Look at Tennessee and Nebraska, but I think they have both finally made the right coaching hires and the right resources. I think the administration finally got it correct in those places.
I would agree. We've got more proof at Tennessee, but I would agree.
I'll even I can't say Sark at Texas. I refuse to do that as an OU fan. That'd be like you praising Michigan.
I praise Michigan all the time when they make the right decisions. That's what I'm here to do.
Well, that's your job, but it's not my job. Well, anyway,
right. It's not.
You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I really appreciate all of your content, and I always enjoy talking to you for a few minutes.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you stopping by. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Dan reminds me of something. I wish my fandom had not, I don't know that it got out there. I announced it one day. and this probably predates all of you watching. But yeah, there was a time nobody had any idea who I rooted for. And you know what? People couldn't even figure it out. And that's what caused me to feel good that I was doing my job, is that people had no idea. Had all sorts of people calling me an Ohio State hater, a Buckeye hater. I should have kept those comments, should have screenshotted all those comments. There's a lot of things I should have done when I started this thing. But we do appreciate you all being here. And we got Chris Phillips coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and got a comment coming in from Adam. Adam, we so much appreciate you. Adam is a faithful viewer, great caller, always has something insightful to bring to the table. Almost always, you know what? Always outside the box, which I appreciate that he's a thinker. And Adam says here, Mark, Michigan is not playing well. They may not even be ranked by midseason. USC will beat them like Texas did. That is possible. That is certainly possible. And maybe we'll just have that discussion with Adam firsthand. All right, let's bring in Adam. Adam, what's going on today? Hello, Adam. Can you hear me?
Mark, can you hear me?
I've got you.
How are you?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
All right. I just want to make a few quick points. First of all, Michigan is not playing their best ball since 2020. They're playing quite terribly. I think they may be unranked by the middle of the year.
Hopefully everybody picked up on my sarcasm. I couldn't have been more sarcastic.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Thank you. All right. Very good.
So I won't belabor the point. Second question for you is, do you think there could be a QB controversy at Texas?
Oh, yes, there could. Sure, there could.
Do you think Arch Manning is as good as yours, if not better?
I have not seen him play except in a spring game and about 3 highlights last week, but I understand that he's supposed to be more talented than Quinn Ewers. Now, whether he has command of the offense, that is highly doubtful. I know that he has great tutelage there between his uncles and between Sark, and I'm sure that his acumen is extremely high, but he's inexperienced, and Quinn Ewers has 2 years of experience. So I would think that they would be well served to keep Quinn Ewers as the starting quarterback, unless there's just some kind of drastic difference. But Quinn Ewers was already one of the best quarterbacks in college football, that they would want to stay with the guy that can read defenses and has a command of the offense.
I agree with you. My last question is, I don't understand why there is always this backlash by some people against hiring Urban Meyer. He won a national title at Florida. He won a national title at Ohio State. Yeah, he's got some character issues, but he wins. And I don't think his character issues have been so egregious that it would justify people deciding not to hire him. Like USC could have hired him. Well, Florida, for God's sake, after this disaster, might consider it. Why aren't people grabbing Urban Meyer?
Well, first of all, I don't know if he wants to come back to coaching. I have no idea. I think he's been asked that and he's dodged it. And I think people have given up asking him.
Yeah.
But yes, the guy has the greatest percentage in the history of modern football. So, yeah, he can you would think he'd be able to write his own ticket to wherever he wants to go. Texas A&M was another example of a job opening that people were throwing his name out. I don't know if he wants to coach again.
Well, I think if you got enough money, I mean, when you look at Brent Venables' contract, you look at Billy Napier having a $40 million buyout. Urban Meyer could command a lot of money and a lot of wins for a program, and I'm surprised that nobody's going after him. But I predict that this weekend USC is going to have a similar win over Michigan, like Texas did, and I think that in 2 weeks, I think Georgia's going to beat Alabama by 7. But
the only counterpoints that I would make on your Michigan USC prediction would be, I'm not saying that you're wrong. We will find out. USC is obviously playing really good football and Michigan is not. However, let's understand that if Michigan has any level of coaching where they can self-scout, they should be able to self-scout their issues against Texas. They're facing a similar offense and be able to self-scout if we give Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator, any kind of credit, who coached in the NFL forever. So the self-scouting aspect of it should be in Michigan's favor. Just the simple pride factor should be in Michigan's favor. And also that they are starting a quarterback who's got nothing on tape, next to nothing on tape, that is a bit of a wild card for USC to try to scout.
Yeah, it certainly could be closer, but I think USC comes out to the victory. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, after the LSU South Carolina game, did you come away thinking that South Carolina is better than people thought, or that LSU was not as good as some had anticipated? Like, who got the benefit of that doubt?
I will say that both, but a larger degree on the South Carolina side. To me, South Carolina was a 5-win football team before this season. Then they go out and smack around Kentucky, which made me think, obviously, they're much better. They're somewhat better, South Carolina, than I thought, but maybe Kentucky's really not that good. Then, yeah, I always like that second legitimate data point. So at this point in the season, everybody's played 3 games. Most teams have had one legitimate data point. The other 2 have been cream puffs. But for South Carolina, so this is a second game that they completely outplayed the other team. Of course, they made a ton of mistakes and blew the game. So I would say it was about 75 to 80% South Carolina, a favored outcome or look at them. And then the other 20-25% that LSU is not as good as I or other people thought.
I agree with you. Well, thanks for answering my questions. I think Texas wins it all this year. Always great talking to you, Mark, and have a great day.
Thanks, Adam.
Take care.
And again, Adam, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. The Amazon links in the description section of this video and all the videos. And here's the deal. I'm going to demonstrate this one day. I think of it too late, but we'll throw up the screenshot and we will show you that if you click on the Amazon link, I will use my own account as an example, that if I take the Amazon link from the description section and then I click on it, Amazon instantaneously knows that it's me. They do not take that as a generic Amazon account. So you keep your history, your account, any kind of benefits that you have with Amazon, and again, your purchase history and everything. And then when you go to purchase on Amazon, it also knows that it's you. So it fills in your credit card information or whatever you've done to set up your Amazon account. So even though you use the Voice of College Football Amazon link, those people at Amazon, they sure are smart. They instantaneously connect you to your account. So you don't have to be concerned with there being any issues. I've tried it a zillion times. I've had friends and family sit right next to me and go through it or on the phone, and they said, works perfectly. Exactly. There we go. So please use the Amazon link. Let's say you spend $50 at Amazon. Hey, they'll send us 2 or 3. How about that? Why send all your money to a company with trillions anyway? All right, quite the day here at the Voice of College Football. We've got the Iowa show at 5:30. You're all well aware of that. That's a great discussion each and every Tuesday with Corey Bratta. 5:30 Eastern on the Hawkeyes channel here at the Voice of College Football. Nebraska Live with Justin Adams at 7. We've got the Biggest 12 show at 7:30. We've got Michigan Live at 8. And then we also have a new show, constantly starting new shows here at the Voice of College Football, and be used to that because we are expanding by the day. But at 8 o'clock Eastern on the SEC channel, we are launching an SEC live show with Matthew Miller and with Tyler Piles. So please join us there. Chris Phillips is stopping by here in what, about 15 minutes? 20 minutes to Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered to break down the week in SEC football. Before that, what we're going to do is break down the week across the country. So let's get to that. All right, folks, don't you love the Thursday night games? Here we go. South Alabama, App State, ESPN. So get your college football week 4 started early with a 7:30 Eastern time game. South Alabama, App State. I can't even tell you what either one of those teams has done. Who was the team that scored 87 points last weekend? Wasn't that South Alabama? Who was that? I don't remember. The 87-10 game against Northwestern State. Yeah, it was South Alabama. There we go. So tune in Thursday night to see if South Alabama can score 87 points again. They would have been the first team since 1991, Fresno State, to score 90 points in a game, but they missed a field goal. So South Alabama taking on App State, which we got to think at this point is not the typical App State team that plays Power 5 teams close and competitive, because they got completely whipped. I did not see this game, don't know anything about it, but 56 points in the first half is just about all you need to know when you see that Clemson put up 56 against App State in the first half. Let's continue to talk a little week 4. Kyle Loomis stopping by from E2C Network. Kyle, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. And still wearing the Auburn orange proudly.
Yes, sir. You got to wear the orange proudly, even though this week, I don't know if Auburn fans have heard yet, we're trying this thing called the Power Stripe at the game, where you have your white outs, your navy outs, orange outs, whatever. The Power Stripe is that iconic stripe look on the top of the helmets, and it's going to be quite the challenge to get the Auburn faithful to pull that off this week. So I don't know what section I'm in yet. You're supposed to wear a color by a certain section. We are notorious for kind of getting involved in these things. The whiteout's probably the best thing that we do, not to the level of Penn State, of course, but we'll see how this goes. It's something that you should probably all college football fans to check in on to see if Auburn can actually get on board with this, especially the students, because they don't have assigned seats. It's a free for all in there.
Well, I would think that one Hank Brown has his mind on other things besides what the student sections are going to be wearing. He's got to learn a playbook better than he has in the past. I'm sure he's been well studied on it prior to, but there's just something a little bit different about being the guy that's going to go out there and take the first snap versus the guy that's helping the coaching staff call in signals.
Yes.
So it's Hank Brown's team this weekend for the SEC opener against Arkansas.
Yes.
Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions against Cal. Your thoughts about one Hank Brown?
Well, here we are again. I feel like you and I have been talking for the last several years now at this point about Auburn changing quarterbacks. It's just been the story of revolving doors, so to speak, since Bo Nix. The change is probably one that needed to be made in regards to production on the field. Now, whether it's the right change, it still remains to be seen. I, for one, am very pleased with what I saw out of Hank Brown in his first start against an opponent, though, that you should do that type of thing against. New Mexico is one of the worst defenses in FBS, so you would hope that your guy would throw that amount of touchdowns, no interceptions, be as proficient. I mean, all his stats looked pretty good. I think he had a few missed throws, a few underthrows, but we also were playing in one of the more torrential downpours that we've had since then. So not to make excuses, but to understand the context around maybe why he wasn't even more proficient on the stat line than he probably was, at least from that standpoint. So for me, I think it's a change that was very refreshing for a lot of the Auburn fan base, one that was wanted by a very loud, I would say probably majority at this point. And so far, we're heading in the right direction. Now, the test, as you brought up, is this Arkansas team. Whether you consider them one of the best in the SEC or not, it's still SEC caliber talent, and this is where the rubber meets the road for Hank Brown. Can he replicate what he did against New Mexico in this coming game?
There's always interest when there's a change at quarterback, and there's typically a change at quarterback, obviously, because the first guy is not getting the job done, meeting expectations. So there is a difference, though, when that guy that comes in is considered a stopgap versus whether he's considered to be the future.
Right.
So are
Yeah.
Auburn fans happy and optimistic because Hank Brown is supposed to be the future?
That's a great question. Some people made the point of why that you should start Hank Brown to find out if your quarterback of the future is on this roster, whether it was him or someone else. I think a lot of people have just grown tired of what they felt like was inconsistent play from Peyton Thorne. I, for one, was a big advocate of him, and as I know you and I have talked about a lot, that Auburn's offensive issues go much further beyond the quarterback and even just Peyton Thorne or Robbie Ashford or TJ Finley. But at some point, you have to ask the question, can we do something different? Does a change need to be attempted? And I would say doing this early in the season is probably a smart thing to do before you get too heavy into the rest of the SEC play down the line when you go on the road to Georgia, to Missouri, to Kentucky, who we know and saw this week is at least susceptible to pull something special off or try to pull something special off. The change, I don't know that I'm one of those people that was hardcore that it needed to be made. I could have gone a little bit longer with Peyton Thorne to see what he did. I think he brings a dynamic to the game that Hank will not in terms of his legs, at least best that I've seen thus far. But what we need right now is maybe a little bit of confidence that maybe Peyton Thorne is lacking at this moment, considering some of the things that he's had to deal with. I don't know if this is where you wanted me to go with this question. I found some very interesting parallels between a point Bo Nix reached in his career with Auburn and Peyton Thorne, where things had gotten just kind of so bad in terms of support and things like that. And his confidence was just so lacking at the point. But you kind of have to make that change. If you remember, there was this homecoming game, which this was against Georgia State, where we nearly lost, and Bo had to be subbed out for TJ Finley, and he came in and led us down the field and won the game in the waning seconds of it all. So is the quarterback change, is this of the future? I think that's where you're wanting me to go with this. I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who still always think that the next great quarterback coming in the class, if they do come in this class, is going to be the person of the future. Is Walker White the person of the future? But I'm glad that we're at least giving Hank a shot to see if he is the solution, not just for the rest of this season, but for the coming seasons as well.
Yeah, there's this league that not many people know about. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's called the NFL. And from what I understand, Bo Nix actually is good enough to play for one of those teams and was selected pretty high.
Yeah.
Again, in some scrub league. So things worked out pretty well for Bo Nix.
Oh, they did. They certainly did. It's amazing what happens when you get some blocking and you get a couple of athletes to actually, catch the ball when it hits them in the hands. And look, this isn't a one criticism on just one area, one group, all that stuff. The offense for Auburn's just been not clicking for the last several years and through multiple coaching changes as well. Bo Nix is definitely one of those you kind of look back and you go, hey, what might have been if we had been able to keep him around? But we'll see what happens here with Hank Brown. I'm optimistic about what's could transpire for him. I'm also optimistic about what happens if he maybe runs into some of the issues that other freshmen do and things maybe get a little bit too fast for them. The beauty of it is that Hank's been around for a year. This isn't a true freshman. This is a redshirt freshman that's been here, been in the system. This is a Hugh Freeze guy. Hugh Freeze talked yesterday in his press conference about how he's been recruiting him since he was in the 10th grade when Hugh was at Liberty. So this is definitely, whether he was meant to be the starter originally or not, this is definitely a Hugh Freeze guy.
Kyle Loomis joining us from E2C Network to break down Auburn taking on Arkansas on the Plains SEC opener for both teams. Yes. Arkansas, I saw them play a couple weeks ago against Oklahoma State, and they were by far the better team physically. They made a ton of mental mistakes in the fourth quarter that blew the game, but they racked up 650 yards of total offense.
Yep.
And outgained Oklahoma State, one of the better teams in the Big 12, we project, by about 280 yards. So with this running back room being as good as it is, and I've seen a couple plays out of Cam Coleman. I did not get to see much of the Cal game. I saw a little bit here and there.
You didn't miss much.
But I saw, yeah, I heard it was a pretty lackluster affair.
Yeah.
But that, at one point you guys had a play where you basically just handed a Cal defender the football to run back for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Sorry to remind you of that,
Yeah.
but that I've seen a couple plays where Cam Coleman looked like the guy that was the most talked about guy practically in the conference during the off season. And then again, with the running back room being what it is from a talent perspective, what else is going wrong?
What else is going wrong is, and let me back that up. It's not going wrong at this point. We just need it to do better. Like, this is the SEC. This is big boy football. This is minor leagues to that acronym that you brought up that somewhere out there, the NFL. You got to be able to push people around, create not just a pocket, but room to run. You saw in this game versus New Mexico, Jarquez Hunter, our running back, finally have the type of game that we know him for. 150 plus yards, a receiving touchdown, and a passing touchdown. And you turned around. I did this during the game. I was like, when did Jarquez pass 100? That's just what he does. He's a workhorse. And if you let him get going, give him some room to operate, he's going to tear you up no matter how good your defense is. So that's one area of it. Creating pass protection. I thought they did a pretty decent job with Hank in this game. No sacks on him. And he was rushed maybe a handful of times. In fact, one of the times that he was rushed was one of I thought his better touchdowns, when he rolled out to his right and hit one of our younger tight ends in the back of the end zone with defenders underneath that receiver as well, kind of threw it to the side and over the top of him with a little bit of pressure. So that offensive line is what's not been working. But we have been progressing slowly. Sure, that we just need that next step. The other thing is injuries too. I do not want this to sound like I'm making excuses. Cam Coleman, as you brought up, is actually not. He didn't play in this last game, and it's questionable if he will in this game. Trying to protect this young talent who was a little banged up during that Cal game. So I think that you've got some injuries at tight end. We just lost a guy for effectively the rest of the year. He may come back. One of our best blocking tight ends. He's a big old guy. And then at right tackle as well, we've had an injury that's been bugging a few others. So a little bit early in the season on the offensive side of the ball, we're having some of those things that happen regularly through the season when you couple that with inconsistencies at times on the offensive line play and then changing quarterbacks again. It can get a little volatile for the Auburn offense, but I choose to believe that things are going to be headed in the right direction here. It seems like we've got that energy back with Hank Brown at the helm.
Well, Auburn was definitely considered the better team than Arkansas during the offseason leading into 2024. Arkansas has put up a better effort against a quality opponent than Auburn did to date. Thus, Auburn's a 3-point favorite at home. 3 points is supposed to be the magic number in regards to Vegas's weight given to a home team. So basically, Vegas is telling us, toss up, you guys decide, because we have no idea who's better here. So this is a toss up.
Yes. I think based on what we see of Arkansas and Auburn, that's a fair assessment. I think you have to give Auburn a little bit of credit at home, which that line does, because this is Jordan-Hare and people have a tough time having good amounts of success. So you might beat us, but it's not going to be like you blow us out most of the time. Let's not talk about that Mississippi State game from several years back under Brian Harsin. I'm okay with that line. To be honest, this could go a number of different ways. As I pointed out, Hank Brown had a great game. The offense had a great game against one of the worst defenses in FBS. Let's see what happens against Arkansas, against an SEC talented thing. The big issue is, as you brought up, their offense. Taylor Green, those running backs, can Auburn stop them? To me, it's more of a, can you contain them on defense? And can you not let other things hurt you? Don't let Taylor Green and the wide receivers that they have, and I'm not aware of how strong those might be, but don't let them become the X factor in this game, because that might be if there is a weak point on Auburn's defense, is their defensive backs. A lot of young, new guys getting experience over there, some injuries as well. We'll get back one of our guys that was out last game, who's one of our young talents at cornerback. That, for me, is the big question here. I think, can they eliminate the passing game as much as possible? Because even if you do a decent job against the running game, against Taylon Green, who's probably going to run it as well, they're still going to get some yards. They're still going to move down the field somewhat. So you got to make them start back there, win that field field positioning game, and just hope to contain that running game.
So, Kyle, for me, the narrative surrounding Auburn football since the last days of Gus Malzahn has been a program and a team that has a few embarrassing moments, not like every week, just a couple embarrassing moments.
Sure.
Because of what they're supposed to be, which to me is the top 15 program in the history of the game.
Yep.
And then a couple opportunities, maybe more than a couple, of being able to do something special.
Right.
Having one of the elites on the brink of disaster for them and not being able to pull through and get the job done. And so what we saw a couple weekends ago against Cal, to me, was, again, this has nothing to do with the talent on the football field or the ability. So I'm going to say some derogatory things about Cal that is not directed at the coach or the team. Those are capable athletes.
Sure.
And it's easy for us to sit up, watch online, watch on TV, sit up in the press box and say, that's Auburn, that's Cal, what's going on here? But those athletes have to go out on the field. And I'm sure a lot of Auburn players would tell us, hey, that guy lining up across from me was really good.
Yeah.
But from a big picture standpoint, it's, Cal, this refugee program that nobody cares about, nobody goes to the games, and all that stuff is a bit overplayed, but still empty seats at the games. Nobody watches them on TV. They don't have a conference. They had to find refuge in the ACC. And it's just kind of this versus this SEC stalwart where the rabid fan base, we pour resources and everything into recruiting and facilities and building a team. And it's just kind of this dichotomy of two different approaches to football. And the one that apparently doesn't care less, of course, we know that's not the case with the coaches and players, but there's just not much attention given to that program, goes in as a 2-touchdown underdog and wins the game.
Yep.
That's kind of an embarrassing moment for the Auburn faithful.
Yeah, embarrassing is a nice way of putting it. Auburn is supposed to take down opponents like this. And again, nothing taken away from Cal. In that situation, we can have all the fun in the world about them being in the Atlantic Coastal Conference. I hope y'all heard that. And all the other things that have happened with that. And gone are the days of Aaron Rodgers and Marshawn Lynch and all that kind of stuff. But they're a historic program with some great history as well. So to me, I do think that's overblown sometimes. But what you're hitting on is the narrative. And it's not just a narrative. It is a bit of a reality. Auburn, for whatever reason, will underplay to their opponent or overplay to their opponent. Note Georgia and Alabama last year. Now, it was within the confines of Jordan Hare, which has some voodoo magic against Georgia and specifically Alabama for the most part, outside of one play last year in the last 2 seasons. I can't explain it to you, Mark. I really can't, other than Auburn just loves playing in Auburn, and they just somehow find a way to be, I wouldn't say relevant to the game, meaning they either play down to who they're currently playing or play up to. It's always an interesting time. It's a roller coaster ride. But yes, you should be able to handle your business against Cal. We went to their place last year with a different offense that clearly wasn't going to work. That was the first sign it was going to work, was on the road at Cal last year. How do you not win at home? Again, most people will point to Payton Thorne, and you're right in saying that he was part of the problem, but he wasn't the only problem. It's a confounding nature of being part of the Auburn experience. I'll tell you that much.
All right, everyone, you can catch Kyle on E2C Network. It's right here on YouTube for everything Auburn, not just football, athletics across the board, the Auburn community, the Auburn family. But of course, there's a big football game to be played to open up the SEC against Arkansas on Saturday. Kyle, appreciate you stopping by as always for breaking down Auburn football for us.
Thank you so much for having me in War Eagle.
Again, that's Kyle Loomis, E2C Network. The letter E, the number 2, the letter C. And I tried to do that backwards so it would translate forwards. I don't know if that worked. E2C Network, everyone. Okay. All right, Jackson, thanks for letting everyone know that we've got the top 25 that actually makes sense. I've been accused in the comment section there. I saw at least a couple people, and this is I've got a streak going where I've been accused at least once, usually more like 10 or 15 times by people when I release the top 25 that actually makes sense, of taking too many drugs of some type. But no, those people never call. Those people never call. They call and discuss it with me rationally, or maybe they've taken too many drugs. Maybe they're not able to call and hold down a rational conversation. Maybe that's the problem. All right, we got Chris Phillips going to show up to talk some SEC football, set up week 4 in the SEC. And that is right here at the Voice of College Football. You can catch Chris at SEC Unfiltered. In the meantime, let's look at the schedule. Oh, yes. I remember where we were. We were running down the great attributes of App State football, which doesn't look like themselves this year after giving up 56 in the first half at Clemson. Former App State teams would not be doing that. They have just put up an impressive showing, not necessarily winning the games, but excellent showings against Power 5 teams. But Clemson got their act together, at least for 1 week, on the offensive side of the ball against App State. And so that game's going to be on Thursday night against South Alabama, 87 points on the board. App State, its last time out, gave up 56 in the first half. I wonder if there's going to be some scoring in those games. Check your over-under on South Alabama and App State. All right, we also have, starting on Friday, I love this matchup. Love it. Actually, I'm good with all 3 games. I am good with all 3 of these games, surprisingly so. I think this is a nice little Friday night for us. I love this Friday night. Why? Because I want to see if Syracuse is a really good football team. And sure, that's not going to be proven against Stanford, but we're going to get to see Kyle McCord in that Syracuse offense, Arante Gadsden, who's been around there forever at Syracuse, really good wide receiver. Syracuse at home against Stanford. When I was going through my video, please check it out on conference rankings. I ranked the conferences. I gave you all the metrics, all the results, all of it. I had to remind myself, because I almost put this down as a non-conference game for this week. No, this is an ACC game with Stanford going to Syracuse, of course. So we will find out more about Syracuse, and the Orange are 2-0. Not to say that this game doesn't matter for Stanford, but basically this game doesn't matter in evaluating Stanford in terms of any kind of championship aspirations. Syracuse might be a dark horse in the ACC, going for 3-0, and they do have 1 win in the conference. They beat Georgia Tech. Okay, the second game is really the headliner, of course, on Fox, and this is the second of a long line of Fox Friday night specials that feature the Big 12 to a lesser extent, and most of these games are going to be the Big 10. We had Kansas State and Arizona last Friday night. This Friday night, this is suddenly an intriguing game. And what are those numbers next to those team names? What do those mean? Why would they put a number next to Illinois and a number next to Nebraska? What do those mean? 24 and 22. Interesting. Very interesting. Somebody will have to explain to me. That must be a typo by ESPN. I don't know what they were trying to do there, but Illinois and Nebraska play on Friday night. And again, they put these odd numbers next to their names because I've never seen those numbers next to those 2 teams. I've never seen any numbers next to those that I can remember. But man, I think that this is going to be a heck of a football game with Brett Bielema, Luke Altmaier and company with a win against Kansas 2 weeks ago. And notice the other two Illinois games, not just the Kansas game. Of course, that's the key one. That's the one that they showed up against a legitimate opponent and played well, won the game, had a pick six that was key in that comeback. But beyond that, keep this in mind. Illinois always struggles against group of five teams. Every year they have struggles. It took a fourth down play for them to come back and beat Toledo last year. They almost lost to FAU a couple years ago. On and on and on and on. MAC teams have given Illinois struggles. What has Illinois done against the two non-conference opponents, last week being Central Michigan? They kicked them around and won the game in a rout, like a real team. How about that? Illinois playing like a real team, 3-0, kicked around two inferior opponents and beat Kansas, who was supposed to be a contender for the Big 12 championship. Illinois. Now, if they win this game at Nebraska, look out. All right, let's get right to it. We're going to talk some more SEC football. I don't think we're bringing in our buddy Chris Phillips to talk Illinois and Nebraska. Don't think he studied that one too much. But we got a good slate in the SEC coming up this week. Chris Phillips with SEC Unfiltered, of course. Chris, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm doing well, man. I appreciate your patience. We were just previewing a couple of the games for week 4 just before I jumped on. So doing well, man. It's crazy. We're already in week 4. It's the season just flies by. We're essentially I guess we're going to be a third of the way through the regular season this weekend, which again, it goes by so quickly, especially when you do what we do, Mark, and you stay wrapped up previewing games, recapping games, talking about things. It's like, man, we're already at game day. So, but no, it's awesome, man. Doing well. Appreciate you having me.
That's why we've got to savor it, everyone. It's the shortest season in sports. It's not the NBA, where as soon as they get done playing the NBA championship, they're scheduling preseason games already. It's the shortest season in sports on the American sports scene. So savor it, folks. Only 12 regular season games. So before we move on to week 4, I got to go back to this LSU South Carolina game. So this had to be a heartbreaker. My heart was breaking, and I'm neutral on the situation because I thought the wrong team won. And of course, our buddy Kyle Kennard, who had a monster game for South Carolina, otherwise got in the way of 2 pick sixes. The one in the first quarter with a horse collar. And then later in the game, of course, the one that kind of broke South Carolina's back. Rocket Sanders was running like a man. And my goodness, Norris Sellers left the ball game, and South Carolina still hung around with Robbie Ashford and not producing as much offense. This South Carolina team, I was just telling a caller who was asking me what we could glean from this game. And I watched every play. I thought it was the best game of the day. I loved it from an entertainment standpoint. Is that maybe LSU's not quite as good as I thought they were in the preseason, that South Carolina is a whole lot better if they can stand up against LSU and basically outplay them start to finish. Your thoughts about South Carolina? Just a crushing loss, because if they were 3-0 right now with 2 SEC wins, oh man.
Yeah, with Akron upcoming, Mark, they'd be moving to 4-0 and then have Ole Miss coming to town for what would be, College game day might be going back to Columbia. To your point, what's kind of a shame in the last 48, 72 hours is because the referee chatter has taken front stage and center, if you will, and front and center. And it's all anybody wants to talk about. To your point, Mark, there's a lot of other really good points about this game that people are completely missing. South Carolina is going to be a problem this year. Like they're going to be that team that I'm not saying the Gamecocks are going to win 8 or 9 or 10 games, but they're going to be that team you're not looking forward to playing. And I think that alone is a victory for Shane Beamer and his program in year 4. They're much better than I thought they would be. The running game was fantastic against LSU. Granted, LSU's got some problems defensively, but the running game was really good. As long as you can get Lenora Sellers back healthy, which it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything serious, obviously, just kind of an ankle sprain, if you will. But I thought drive after drive, you see him getting more comfortable, Mark, in the offense. And so I think South Carolina, they're not going to be extremely explosive offensively, but I felt like watching them early in that game, especially, they know their identity. They feel comfortable in that. I think Lenora Sellers is getting more and more comfortable. Rocket Sanders, you mentioned, is a real dude. They got a couple guys that are maybe starting to step up at wide receiver with Jared Brown and Mazeo Bennett and some other guys as well. And then defensively, I mean, they're a real issue for teams. I mean, that defensive front is legit. They went up against one of the best offensive lines in the country in LSU, and I mean, they gave them all they wanted and then some. So, listen, referees are the focus, Mark. I totally understand why. The 2 pick sixes are the ones folks point to. There was also a phantom offensive pass interference that I thought was a really bad call. I thought the horse collar was a horse collar. I don't have an issue with that. That was the right call. In stadium, the personal foul on Garrett Nussmeier, Mark, I thought it was the right call at the time because it looked like he got decked. And then you go back and watch it on TV, and you're like, it wasn't nearly as bad as it looked in person. I would have probably rather than put that flag in the pocket. But as you can imagine, Mark, I'm a really popular man in Columbia, South Carolina this week because I've spent the week more so giving credit to LSU and saying that despite the refs, I don't think the game was robbed from South Carolina. I don't think they got jobbed. I think there were plenty of opportunities to, despite the bad calls, win the football game. And they didn't. And that's just, it's the nature of the beast. It is what it is. Like, you had opportunities to win. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about the refs if you don't botch into first half, end of game opportunities to kick field goals. We can play the hypothetical game to a blue in the face. What if Garrett Nussmeier doesn't have a snap, hit him in the face, and they fumble and turn it over? What if they're able to convert 4th and inches from the goal line? Like, we can sit here and play these games all we want. Certainly, though, if you're a South Carolina fan, if you're pulling for South Carolina, that's a game you feel like you should have won. You're up 17-0 on your home field. And Mark, I was there in person. It was an insane asylum, my friend. Like, it was the most raucous noon game atmosphere by far that I have ever experienced. So it's a shame because you feel like you let one get away. But I also think, Mark, we got to spend some time and give a lot of credit to LSU because to go into an environment like that, down 17-0, have the resiliency to come back and secure that win, says a lot about Brian Kelly and the culture he's built at LSU.
And it showed me that those South Carolina students and fans, they are just hungry for that kind of win. But they were just pressed up against the gates, ready to flood that field. And there's like a minute left, and LSU sitting at the 5-yard line. Yeah. And it's like, do we understand the game situation here?
Yeah, it's South Carolina's got a rabid fan base, for better or for worse in some instances, but they've got an incredible fan base. Gamecock Nation showed up and showed out, like I mentioned, Mark. I was at that game, went to College Game Day, hung out at the tailgates. The love and support we felt as we're on our SEC Unfiltered tour was immense. We'll be dropping the full vlog, by the way, on social media and our YouTube tomorrow and Thursday. But, listen, it's a fan base that's starving to get back to what Steve Spurrier had that program at. And, you kind of felt like a moment you're sort of knocking on the door. And, again, I hate how active the officials were. But, again, Mark, I'm just not someone, and I've sort of just, pissed some people off, for lack of a better way of putting it, by just simply saying that, I'm not saying the refs were good in the game. They weren't good. There were obviously some plays in that game that the refs impacted greatly, but South Carolina still should have won. There were still opportunities where they could have won that game, and there were controllables in that game, Mark, that South Carolina could have done a better job at, and they didn't, and that's why they lost. And it seems as if in South Carolina circles early this week, if you're a talking head that dare say that, no, they didn't get robbed, they didn't do what they needed to do to win. Oh my God, you are labeled as like an ultimate hater, and how dare you? You're an idiot. And I even got a comment this morning, Mark, that some of your buddies, Chris Marler and SEC Mike and Josh Pate, they're all saying that Carolina got robbed. Like, you're wrong, man, you're wrong. And I'm like, Mark, well, I mean, I know you're on social media, Mark. You've been on my show. You've seen some of the comments. I was like, well, I mean, they probably looked at my comments over the last week plus from Gamecock fans and said, you know what, it's really not worth fighting that fight. And I don't blame them for it, but I guess I just haven't learned my lesson yet when it comes to that. So anyways, listen, refs were a part of it. There's no question. They weren't the whole reason, though. And South Carolina, listen, again, that's what's being lost in this. There's a lot of reasons to be encouraged if you're a South Carolina fan. Like, that team is a lot better, I think, than they were tabbed in the preseason. And if, they can clean a couple things up, get Lenoris Sellers back healthy, obviously losing him second half. I think that's maybe the biggest reason you lost the game, is just losing him. The offense lost its dynamic nature, and, Robbie Ashford, God bless him, but just isn't a good quarterback. So that's a bowl team, Mark, in my mind. That's a team that can get to 7 wins. And I think if you'd have told Gamecock fans that before the year, I think they'd have marked that as a success.
Both can be true, folks. The officiating can be subpar, and the team can blow the game at the same time.
Yeah,
both can be true.
Yep. And that's the only point I've made all week, Mark. It's just, but people, it's funny how that group, they don't want to hear that. It's if you're not on the side of they got robbed, this is BS, let's start a petition to out these officials, then you're in the wrong, which that's just not how I operate, Mark, in life and business and sports. I just, it's when you're on the winning side and your opponent is doing that, you make fun of those people. So I'm just, that's just not my lane, man. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses and blame officials. And when there's a game to break down and there's things that happen in game, you're deflecting from things that happen in the game. I'd rather talk ball than just spend the entire week talking about officials.
That's why we got you here, Chris. Chris Phillips, SEC Unfiltered, of course. And when you bring up the Unfiltered tour, where are you headed this week?
Yeah, really, really excited, Mark. We are headed to the loveliest little village on the plains, Auburn, Alabama, to watch Auburn take on Arkansas at Jordan-Hare Stadium. I know that's not, college game days going to Norman. They're going to Oklahoma, Tennessee. That'll be a really good game, I'd imagine. I think this, though, the game we're going to, Mark, I think it might be the most intriguing game of the weekend. When you think about what's on the line for both these teams, you could have the argument of, like, who needs the win more. Hank Brown obviously getting his first start against an SEC team. We really just have no idea what to expect. Arkansas trying to have an early season signature win. They dropped the ball in Stillwater against Oklahoma State, kind of let that opportunity slip through their fingers. So I'm excited, man. And again, I've never obviously been to Auburn, never been to Jordan-Hare. I've heard so many good things. Really excited to get down there and hang out with the great Tigers and Razorbacks because I'm friends with both. So it's going to be a really, really fun weekend.
Chris, we'll get to that headliner that people are talking about. And I guess Oklahoma officially becomes an SEC team this week and taking on Tennessee at home. These two teams got together around the Baker Mayfield era. OU won both of those games. So Tennessee looks like the better football team right now. They got it rolling. They're not seeing Kent State this week, though. I just can't believe that we actually were considering a running clock in a major college football game, but that's how bad it got in Knoxville last week. It's 65-0, folks, at halftime. And then we've got Oklahoma, of course, who's been ravaged by injuries, gets some of those guys back, as I understand, along the offensive line and a wide receiver this week. Actually turned in a pretty decent effort against Tulane, considering Tulane was playing good football, of a solid football team. Oklahoma pulled away in the second half. So Jackson Arnold's got to get his game together against Tennessee. What are your thoughts about this matchup?
So like I mentioned, Mark, I think we're going to honestly we'll look back on Sunday and say we went to the right game. I think Auburn, Arkansas has got the potential to be the drunkest game of the weekend, kind of like LSU, South Carolina was, where it was just kind of wacky all over the place. Because I think with this one, the hype, the hoopla, the buildup, Mark, dare I say, I think it's gonna outweigh what we get in the game, because I think Tennessee's going to win this game by double digits. I've seen nothing from Oklahoma offensively that tells me they can keep up. Tennessee's front seven is legitimate. They are for real. They are ferocious. And Oklahoma struggled against non-conference competition to move the ball against them and to block them. Mark, Jackson Arnold is this team's leading rusher. I mean, they can't run the ball. They can't get a push. And that's coming against, Temple, Houston, and Tulane. And all due respect to those three teams, this Tennessee team is different. Now, I think what could be interesting, because Oklahoma's defense is legit too. I love the under in this game, by the way. I don't know how the over-under is at 57.5, because I think we got a pair of really good defenses. I do think that Oklahoma's defense can make this interesting early if they can force Nico into a mistake or two, maybe give the offense a short field, make things sort of simple for Jackson Arnold. And like you mentioned, they're getting some guys back from injury, so that could make a difference for sure. But I do trust Tennessee. I do trust Nico Iamaleava. I trust the running game with Dylan Sampson. I love the weapons, obviously, they have. And I know again, they've been picking on some inferior competition. There's no doubt. They've inflated their stats a good bit. But they did also dismantle an NC State team that I think a lot of people had high hopes for to compete in the ACC. And I know they've ended up probably not being very good. Let's just call it for what it is. But I love this Tennessee team, Mark. I picked them to go to the college ball playoff in the preseason. I just think when you look at the matchup in this game, the two defenses are what we're going to be talking about. But I don't know how. And I think this game could be close at half, Mark. But I think Tennessee will pull away. I don't know how Oklahoma is going to be able to go blow for blow with Tennessee, because at some point I think that defense for Oklahoma is going to let up. Like, I just think at some point it's probably going to be a lot of bend but don't break. They're probably going to break at some point. Can Jackson Arnold and company, can the offensive line, can they give him time, get enough of a push to give him time to operate? Can they establish any sort of running game? Because Deion Burks, I think, can have success against that secondary, but it's all about can they protect Jackson Arnold. And if they can't, if James Pierce Jr. and company are getting in the backfield, getting after him, you're going to force him into some mistakes. I mean, we've seen he's a bit of a gunslinger, and things can get sideways. So I like Tennessee in this game. I know the emotions of Josh Heupel going back to Norman and first SEC game, College game day is there, night game there in Norman. I think Tennessee's the better team, Mark. I think Tennessee's the better team. I think they will show that. I think they win this game by double digits. I think they'll cover the spread and move to 1-0 in conference play.
Chris, we've got Florida taking on Mississippi State, and I don't know that we've ever seen a situation surrounding a head coach quite as drastic and dire as Billy Napier. We've seen dead man walking in week 2, week 3, week 4, but they didn't have to face the kind of schedule that Billy Napier may or may not get to face anyway. But considering that they've played 2 home games in what is supposed to be a huge home field advantage, and they've just gotten dragged around the field by good teams, but nothing exceptional. And now they go play Mississippi State. This Billy Napier situation is just like the administration's just waiting to get the phone call from the bank to say, okay, we got the funds, let her rip, and Billy's gone.
Yeah, Billy is absolutely, to your point, Mark, a dead man walking. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. You talk to folks down there, there were reports of the Board of Trustees meeting that was going to take place on Sunday that obviously never happened. And everybody's asking, is this the game where if they lose, he's gone? Is it the next game? It could happen at any time. I'd imagine now we're into game week. He's not going to get fired this week. If they lose to Mississippi State, is that the final nail in the coffin? Probably. State's a bad team. They just got blown out by Toledo, Mark. So this is the sicko game of the week in the SEC, right? Like, this is the one that you really got to love to a maybe a sickening level to watch this one and be locked in. I'll be there. I can admit I'm a sicko. I'll be watching that game. Very fascinating matchup, right? Both sides really feel like they want it, need it. Florida desperately needs it. So, it's a game I think Florida should win. Honestly, Mark, I just look at it. I think Florida's got more athletes. I really do. But who knows, man? Who can get their team up off the mat? Mark, is the big question. I do actually think it helps Florida getting out of the swamp. I just think with the situation they're currently in, it's really, really toxic. Billy Napier's getting booed. They're chanting fire Billy Napier. Getting away from that, going on the road, trying to disappoint the home crowd at the opposing venue. I think that can be a really good thing for Florida. And then for Mississippi State, their fan base is as distraught as any with, the loss to Toledo happening. So, again, Mark, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Billy's going to lose his job. It's a really, really tough situation down in Gainesville.
Hey, Chris, with Missouri messing around with Boston College in a pretty competitive game, I know that they took control in the second half, but still 27-21 in that one. Any concerns about Missouri possibly not being as good as many people thought, taking on Vandy this week?
No, I don't think so. I think that, still early in season. That was their first real competition. The first 2 weeks they played the schools of the deaf and blind, respectfully. It just, they played nobody, right? So I'm not gonna be down on Mizzou for finding a way to beat a top 25 team on their home field. Say what you want about Boston College, but they got a guy in Castellanos at quarterback that he's just annoying enough, and I say that complimentary. Yep. He's just frustrating enough to make games interesting, right? Especially even if they have some inferior competition, he frustrates the defense. Then you saw them take some shots and hit them with some breakdowns in the Missouri defense, which I know they're going to want to clean up. But I don't worry about Mizzou against Vandy. Unfortunately, Vandy, who we were really pulling for the 3-0 versus 3-0 matchup. They go on the road to Georgia State, and Mark, they turn back into the pumpkin, right? They turn back into Vandy. So I like Diego Pavia, their quarterback. Love his game. I think he's kind of like Castellanos, where he could frustrate the Missouri defense just enough to, I think cover, because I think Mizzou's like a 21.5 point favorite in this game. But I do like Missouri to win. I don't have any concerns they could possibly drop this game. I do think Vandy covers, though. If you look at the series history in this, Mark, these games are typically closer than you would expect. Even last year, Missouri only beat Vandy by 17 points. And we all know what Missouri was and what Vandy was. And so you think about that score, and you're like, that don't make any sense. But these games, I don't know. Vandy typically plays Mizzou pretty tough. I don't think the game's ever in doubt, but I think they'll cover. But I think Missouri, I feel very, very confident they'll get the win. And I still am a believer in Missouri and what they can be or what they are, excuse me. The offense is elite. It's all about the defense and the questions on that side with Corey Batoon. And we'll see how they handle Diego Pavia, especially after a week after Castellanos, I think, really stressed them out.
The rest of the SEC slate is just a bunch of get-right games. Get healthy, get ready for the SEC season. The only name brand game, and it's probably in name only, is expecting that UCLA can put up any kind of fight in Death Valley, which if we watched them play against Indiana last week, they couldn't even handle the Hoosiers. So this looks like a bad deal for UCLA out of the Big Ten taking on LSU.
Yeah, LSU big. I think that – the biggest question for them is, when I say how do they bounce back or how do they respond, people might raise an eyebrow, Mark, but it's just as important how you respond after an emotional win as it is an emotional loss. It's does LSU, attack this game the right way? Are they overlooking their opponent, God forbid? UCLA is not a good football team. They're not. We did our deep dive, actually our preview on that game this morning. Deshaun Foster, he may end up being a really, really good coach at UCLA, but it's not going to be. He just doesn't have the team this year. So LSU, I think they're going to be in control of this one. I expect them to win and win big. They're a 24-point favorite. I would not be surprised they cover. You certainly, I think Brian Kelly will have his team locked in and focused. You're not going to be overlooking a Power 4 team, a team out of the Big Ten, but yeah, this is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and certainly a game that I think LSU should just be able to roll. I think there's things for LSU, though, you can definitely get out of this game, right? Cleaning up some things from last week. Garrett Nussmeier's got to be more efficient, because you look at it, he got bailed out on those penalties, but he threw 2 pick sixes. You can look at it that way. I'm sure the LSU coaching staff is as well, that we're counting those as turnovers against you, right? When we're marking our points or our negatives or whatever, we're counting that against you, right? So I think you want to see Garrett Nussmeier be more in control. I'm curious to watch kind of some individual personnel with LSU. The wide receiver room outside of Kyron Lacey, the continued development of those guys and who's emerging on the outside. Caden Durham, the young freshman running back for LSU that really shined in that game against South Carolina. The running game as a whole, will it get going finally? They just have not been able to run the football to the clip they expected. Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams, and again, I just mentioned Durham. And then on the defensive side, again, lots of things to clean up, fit in their gaps correctly. But they should be able to take advantage of UCLA. It's just, again, not a good team. I think my score prediction mark in that one was something like 44-17. I don't see UCLA posing much of an issue. I think LSU comes out of the gate hot. I think they're going to be focused, locked in. They've got this game. They've got South Alabama next week, then a bye, and then the Ole Miss Rebels comes to town, which, by the way, spoiler mark, we will be in Baton Rouge for that game. So a trip I'm very much so looking forward to. But no need for a look ahead here. That one's weeks away, and you got things to clean up, and I think they will, and I think LSU will win big.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Caden Durham looked good for LSU, and if he doesn't step up, maybe they don't pull it off in Columbia last week. And this UCLA team, this actually might be a good test for LSU in this way. There's no comparison between the two teams. It should be an easy win, but we've seen stranger things. It should be an easy win. However, UCLA is going to present like maybe they don't have a complete offense. They don't have a complete defense, but like 3 dudes that are NFL dudes, type dudes on each side of the ball that at least you can evaluate. Okay, let's see how this guy, our right guard, stacks up against their D tackle, or our wideout against their best corner, kind of thing, where UCLA has at least a handful of those kind of guys that you can evaluate your team without possibly being threatened on the scoreboard.
Yeah. And again, it's you call it a get right game. It's just a good opportunity for LSU to clean things up. Right. So, we maybe UCLA, we're in for the shocker of a lifetime, but I just don't see it, man. I think in Death Valley, LSU will be fired up to build some momentum. It's kind of, Mark, you're starting a new season. You beat South Carolina. It's like, all right, we won that big SEC road game. Yes, we lost to USC in week 1, but all of our goals are still in front of us, man. Everything we want to achieve, getting into the college football playoff and maybe more than that, They're all in front of us. We're in control of our destiny, right? You're not sitting here with 2 losses thinking, oh my God, like it's a hopeless endeavor, backs against the wall. You're 1-0 in conference play. You got these 2 non-conference games upcoming, then the bye, and then you really get in the meat of things. So, I think for LSU, again, great opportunity to get off on the right foot in what feels like a quote-unquote new season, and I think they will do that.
SEC Unfiltered, folks, with Chris Phillips. You can see right there his personal X handle, also where you can find SEC Unfiltered. Chris, appreciate you stopping by. Look forward to seeing you hopefully every Tuesday as you break down the SEC for us.
Absolutely, Mark. I look forward to it, man. Appreciate you, all your followers, listeners, and check us out at SEC Unfiltered wherever you get your content.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Have a good week.
Mark, you're the man. I appreciate it. You too.
All right. Chris and the crew going to be on the plains to take in Auburn and Arkansas. We also provided you a preview with Kyle Loomis from E2C Network. We are off to our next stop, Iowa Live 5:30, Nebraska Live at 7, the biggest 12 at 7:30, Michigan at 8, and our new SEC Live show with Matthew Miller and Tyler Piles that's coming up Tuesday night. Tonight, every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time over on the SEC channel. So get on over there, check out the SEC channel, and we'll be back again. Iowa Live at 5:30. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you in a few hours. College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, showstopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.